Hi, I'm Reverend Wendy Craig-Purcell here at the Unity Center in San Diego. Thank you so much for watching today. If you'd like to support the work that we do here, please consider making a contribution. Go to our website. It's easy to do. Thank you in advance for that contribution.
Things aren't always as they appear, are they? And I bet that's one of the first awakenings that we have on the spiritual path, is we awaken and we begin to see things in ways that we had never seen them before. And we begin to understand in ways that we have never understood before. So often we can look, but we really don't see. We can look, but we really don't see. Seeing is about understanding. How many times have you said about something, "Oh, I see now. I see." And you were referring, when you said that, "I see," you were referring to something much deeper than just looking, correct? You were saying, "I understand. I recognize. I recognize." My favorite part of the Easter story is not the story of the resurrection, and we're going to get to that in just a moment. But my favorite part of the Easter story is Mary. Is Mary when she is at the tomb and she's crying. And she turns around because someone says to her, "Why are you crying?" And mistakenly, she doesn't recognize Jesus. She thinks Jesus is who? The gardener. And she asks him, thinking that he's a gardener, "Where have you taken my Lord? Where have they put him?" And he says to her, "Mary." And in that moment that he says to her, "Mary, Mary," she recognizes, she says, "Rabboni." I love the term Rabboni. It's an affectionate term of rabbi. And rabbi to me is an endearing term. It's a term teacher. And in that moment, when he calls her by name, she finally recognizes him. Spiritual awakening is about that. It's about recognizing the truth. It's always there, but we don't always see it. We don't always recognize it. It is so important when we look mystically and metaphysically at the Easter story that we do not confuse the story that attempts to explain what happened with the experience that something did happen after Jesus' death in the lives of his disciples that changed them. We must not confuse the explanation of the story with the experience. That idea was first presented to Christians with questions by a man by the name of Bishop John Shelby Spong. I want to read something to you that he wrote about this. He wrote, "There is no question in my mind that had there not been some transforming experience that happened to the disciples after the death of Jesus, there would be no Christianity. But what people don't understand is that the idea that that experience meant the resuscitation of a body that could walk physically out of a tomb on the third day after crucifixion is a very late development, a very late development. You will not find it in Paul. You will not find it in the Gospel of Mark. Most people are surprised to know that in the first gospel written, which was the Gospel of Mark, written in the early 70s, that nowhere does the risen Christ ever appear in Mark to anybody. It's added later. Mark was the first gospel written, and it was not written until 70 years after the crucifixion. How many of you have a really good memory that can remember details that far back? Some of us in this room, I'm not quite there yet, but we've got 70-year-olds in this room. Can you remember that far back? Probably not. He goes on to write, "There is a powerful Easter experience that starts the whole Christian faith, that transforms the disciples, changes them from cowards who had forsaken Jesus and fled, and brought them back into being heroic followers of Jesus. It changed the way they understood God, so that whatever that Easter experience really was, they could never again think of God without seeing Jesus as part of that definition. Something incredibly powerful happened, but it had nothing to do with the resuscitation of the body. Is that new news to you, that idea of the resuscitation of the body, the risen Christ, was something that was added much later? That's shocking to a lot of people, and yet it's really important to get that. Because what we have is there was an experience that those disciples had after Jesus' crucifixion that somehow transformed their understanding of who he really was. Because you see, during his lifetime, they never got what he was about. They thought he was going to set up an earthly kingdom. And if you remember, they were always jockeying for position. And they were always wondering, they didn't quite say it this way, at least it's not recorded this way in the Gospels, so it's a little like sibling rivalry. Who do you love better, Jesus? Who's your favorite? They didn't get what he was about. Just as many today who say they are Christian really don't get what he was about. Those who got what he was about were called followers of the way. Followers of the way. And that did not happen until after the transformation of whatever the disciples experienced that caused them to think about him in a very different way. They could finally recognize, in a way similar to Mary recognizing, oh, he was here to do something different. He taught a message of love. He taught a message of inclusion. He taught a message of forgiveness. He taught a message of service. And if you are to follow me, meaning him, you are to follow in those footsteps. Your faith is to be an active faith, not a recitation of a creed or a dogma or a doctrine. It's to be a way of life. It's to be a way of life. It is to awaken our soul in such a way that we see no longer through a mirror dimly, but we can see the God in one another. Would we not literally transform our families, our communities, and our world if we literally saw the God in one another and did everything we possibly humanly could to nurture and support a growing awareness of that God presence, not only in ourselves, but in each other? Would we live in a different world? Absolutely, we would live in a different world. Metaphysically, and we in this room, as students of unity, as students of the science of mind and heart, as new thought students, we look at things through metaphysical and through mystical eyes. We look at the resurrection not literally. We look at it metaphysically and symbolically. It's not a rising from the dead, but it is actually a rising up in consciousness. Think about it from a literal standpoint here. The higher you go up physically, what happens to your viewing point? What happens to what you can see? You can see so much more. You can see so much more. You can see so much further. And this is exactly what happens to us spiritually when we have a spiritual, metaphysical resurrection. We are literally rising above. We are rising above limitation. We are rising above separation. We are rising above appearance, and we are seeing clearly. We are seeing through the illness to the truth of wholeness. We are seeing through separation to the truth of inclusion. We fundamentally change as we rise, as we come up higher. And symbolically, resurrection means, Symbolically, resurrection means that we can reach the lowest points in our life, those times in our life where it almost feels as if we are going through a death, a dark night of the soul, but we will find our way out. Raise your hand if you can relate to any part of that. Absolutely. You see, every part of the Easter story is our story. It is our story. From the time in the Garden of Gethsemane, and God, if this cup can pass from me, let it pass from me, but not my will, but thy will be done, is the epitome of surrendering and turning everything over to God when you've done everything you possibly can and you can't do anything more. You turn it over. And in turning it over to that one presence and that one power, that one life, you let go. And you trust, and you trust. To the riding into Jerusalem, meaning the habitation of peace, fully knowing what he was about to experience, that is you and me riding fully into, not pulling back from, but leaning into whatever is up for us in our life that is difficult, that is challenging. Instead of running away from it, because we know that when we run away from it, it just seems to run faster and catch us, right? Just like when we bury something, what happens? It comes back. It's like that beach ball. You push it down in the water, right? And you can keep it down for a while, but what happens the minute you let go of pushing down the beach ball? Oh, come on. It's Easter, but you can be who you really are. It comes right back up again, right? Comes right back up again, because whatever is ours to learn, whatever is ours to learn in our spiritual journey, is going to present itself in many different ways until what? Until we learn it. Until we learn it. And there's a point in the journey that we might resist or almost feel as if the constant lesson that keeps reappearing is a punishment, but in truth it's not. It's not. It's a gift, and it's a gift because it is the very thing that when we get what it is trying to teach us, that we will feel as if we have awakened. And so no matter where we are in our lives, humanly and personally, there is the opportunity for us for newness. There is the opportunity for us to rise above. There is the opportunity for us to awaken and to see things differently, to let the scales fall from our eyes, to thin the veil between us and the higher truth, and in so doing, to find that we begin to recognize that which we had been unaware of before. We get to recognize the power, we get to recognize the possibility, we get to recognize the truth, we get to recognize the love, we get to recognize the health and the wholeness. When we, like Mary, had that moment of recognition, we will experience an awakening of our soul. And it will fundamentally change everything about the way we look at everyone and everything in our lives. It is as if we will begin to look through brand new eyes. We will not look through a mirror dimly anymore, but we will see clearly. We will be able to look at that which is challenging and recognize that there is a gift in it. There is a gift in it. And so this idea of awakening, this idea of the Easter story, is not a story 2,000 years old. If we leave it there, if we leave it as that, we miss the incredible gift of what it is. Jesus did not come to say, worship me. He came to help us have a different understanding of truth, of reality, and of God. And that as we have a different understanding of truth and reality and God, we will also see each other differently. And when we see each other differently, we will co-create an entirely different world. Namaste.
Many people enjoy Reverend Wendy's talks and meditations and aren't able to attend the Unity Center in person. If you're part of our extended family from around the world and would like to help support the Unity Center, please go to our website or download our free app, which offers even more ways to connect with the Unity Center. Namaste.